Most people think a diamond ring is a gift, but in this family, it was a weapon. Stick around to see the exact moment the perfect son realized he was being erased from his own life. If you're here for the raw truth, hit that sub button. Let's dive in. The first thing I heard that morning was my mother laughing downstairs, bright and rehearsed, like a commercial family having the perfect Saturday. It was my birthday, and for some reason I still half believed that birthdays were the one day you were allowed to take up space. My name is Ronan Hale. I was 20 years old, living in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, and that morning I told myself not to expect anything big, just maybe someone saying, "Happy birthday, Ronan." I walked down the stairs, still rubbing sleep from my eyes, and the whole dining room was glowing with lights and the smell of fresh coffee. For half a second I thought maybe they actually remembered. Then I saw my mom standing behind my sister Elodie, carefully fastening a diamond ring onto her finger like it was some kind of movie proposal. My dad, Gordon, sat at the head of the table in that stiff bank manager posture he always used when he thought he was teaching life lessons. Before we go further, share in the comments which country you're watching from, and let's continue. He was talking about how stressful this year had been for Elodie. She really deserved something special after everything, he said, like I wasn't standing right there in the doorway. That was when I noticed the cake sitting in the center of the table. Pastel frosting, careful blue lettering, "Happy birthday, Elodie." Not my name, not even a second candle. I let out a short laugh that came out more like a cough. "Cool," I said. "Did we reschedule my birthday and forget to tell me, or is this some kind of 2-for-1 deal?" My mom barely looked up. "Ronan, don't start being touchy," she said. "We took you out for burgers on Tuesday. That was for your birthday, remember?" Dad leaned back in his chair and gave a slow sigh. "You're an adult now," he said. "Character matters more than cake. Life isn't about keeping score over gifts." I didn't answer fast enough. His eyes hardened. "And if you're serious about acting grown, watch the attitude. College isn't free, and we don't have to keep paying for a car you clearly don't appreciate." Elodie stared at the ring, twisting it slowly. "It was Mom's idea," she muttered quietly. My mom noticed my face and shrugged. "You understand, right? We didn't want to waste another cake." Dad nodded once, like that settled everything. I laughed again, louder this time. "Good to see the Miracle Child program still fully funded," I said. Before anyone could answer, I turned, walked down the hallway, and took the stairs 2 at a time toward my room, already reaching for the car keys sitting on my desk beside the photo my granddad Walter took the day he handed me that old sedan. I shut the door to my room harder than I meant to, and the cheap frame rattled against the wall. The house kept moving like nothing happened. I could still hear dishes clinking downstairs, and my mom talking softly to Elodie about the ring, her voice warm in a way it never was with me. I dropped onto the bed and stared up at the thin crack running across the ceiling, the same crack I'd been looking at since I was a kid. My brain kept replaying my dad's voice like a broken recording. College, car, attitude. The room around me looked less like a bedroom and more like a storage unit someone forgot to organize. The dresser was an old one my parents dragged out of the basement years ago. The desk was scratched and missing one handle. In the corner sat a cardboard box full of middle school soccer trophies I hadn't even seen in years, like someone quietly retired my wins when I stopped being useful. Across from the bed hung my corkboard. Receipts, a class schedule, a faded movie ticket, and one small note written in thick black marker months earlier. "Get through this year, then go." I stared at it for a long time. When I wrote that, it felt dramatic, like something you write when you're angry and then forget about. Now it looked more like instructions. My mind drifted back to my granddad Walter's garage the previous summer. The place always smelled like motor oil and cheap coffee. I remembered him wiping his hands on a rag before pressing a set of keys into my palm. "Technically, the sedan's in your parents' name for insurance," he told me, leaning against the workbench. "But I bought it for you. Think of it as something every man should have." "What's that?" I asked. He gave a small, crooked smile. A way out if you ever need one. I sat up on the bed and checked the clock. The house had gone quiet. It was close to 11. That was when the arguing in my head finally stopped. I grabbed my backpack from the chair and tossed it onto the bed. A couple of shirts went in first, then a hoodie, worn jeans, my phone charger, and the folder with my ID and school paperwork. I packed slowly, but without hesitation, like some part of me had been rehearsing this moment for months. From the closet shelf, I pulled down a shoebox and lifted the lid. Inside were wrinkled bills I'd been saving since high school from cafe tips and random odd jobs. I counted them carefully. $87. It wasn't much. It wasn't even close to enough. But it was more than zero. I zipped the backpack and slung it over my shoulder, then opened my bedroom door slowly so the hinges wouldn't squeal. The hallway floor had one board that always creaked near the bathroom, so I stepped around it from memory. Downstairs, the house hummed quietly. The dishwasher ran in the kitchen, and a television murmured behind my parents' bedroom door. Nobody noticed me moving through the dark. When I reached the kitchen, I paused in front of the refrigerator. The whole thing was covered with photos held up by magnets. Elodie at piano recitals, Elodie at homecoming, Elodie smiling on the beach. I spotted myself in maybe 3 pictures total, always in the background, slightly blurred, sometimes half cut off. I looked away and reached for the hook beside the back door where the car keys hung. Dad's voice echoed again in my head. The car we pay for. My jaw tightened. Walter gave it to me, I muttered quietly, even if the paperwork said something different. I stepped outside into the cool night air. The yard smelled like cut grass and damp soil. The old sedan waited in the driveway under the dim porch light, its faded paint dull and familiar. I tossed the backpack into the passenger seat and slid behind the wheel. For a moment, I just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, waiting for the guilt to show up. It didn't. Instead, I felt something clear and steady settle into my chest. I started the engine, rolled slowly down the driveway without turning on the headlights, and eased toward the corner of the street before finally flicking the lights on and steering the car toward downtown, aiming straight for the place I remembered from a school flyer, Harbor House, as my tires carried me away from the house. The building looked plain from the outside. Brick, 2 stories, a narrow strip of dying grass between the sidewalk and the curb, but it was definitely the same place I'd seen on that flyer in the counselor's office sophomore year. Harbor House Youth Resource Center. I parked the car a block away behind an auto parts store and walked the rest of the way with my backpack slung tight like I knew what I was doing. Inside, it smelled like bleach and cheap soap. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A bulletin board near the entrance listed shelter rules in printed letters. Curfew at 10, stay clean, respect others' space. Behind the front desk was a woman in a windbreaker with her hair up in a tight bun and a face that said she'd seen everything twice. "I'm Shelley Ortiz," she said, setting down her pen. "First time?" I nodded, then hesitated before saying, "Things got bad at home." She didn't blink. "You're not the first. You won't be the last. Fill this out and here's a blanket." She handed over a clipboard and a folded navy blanket without making it feel like charity. As I filled out the form, she explained the basics. I'd be in a shared room, there were chores and check-ins, and they could help with work, school, and documents if I needed it. But only if you follow the rules. We run tight. "I'm good with rules," I said, and meant it. That first night, I lay on a thin mattress in a 6-bed room with my backpack looped through my ankle strap like a lifeline. Some guy a few beds over snored with one nostril clogged, and the walls were thin enough to hear traffic outside. I kept wondering if my parents had walked past the driveway yet and noticed the car was gone. The next few days blurred together. Cafeteria-style breakfasts, group meetings, job boards pinned with handwritten notes, me walking the nearby streets with a stack of printed resumes, pretending I was just looking for part-time hours instead of rewriting my entire life. 3 blocks away, I spotted a cracked window with a hand-painted sign taped to the glass. Help wanted, barista, flexible hours. I stepped inside more to get warm than anything else. The place smelled like cinnamon and old wood. Behind the counter stood a guy with tattooed forearms and a beard that looked about a week late to be trimmed. "You hiring?" I asked, holding up one of my resumes. "You know how to make coffee?" he said, looking me up and down. "Not really." He raised an eyebrow. "Want to learn?" "Yeah." He nodded toward the espresso machine. "Try a shot." I fumbled through the process. Buttons, steam, awkward tamping. It came out watery. He took one sip, winced, and said, "You're not the worst I've seen. You can start tomorrow." His name was Toby Rusk. The place was called Rusk Coffee, and it ran on loud playlists, sarcastic employees, and mugs that didn't match. I started doing the early shift, opening at 6, then heading back to Harbor House to shower before tackling whatever paperwork Shelley put in front of me that day. Around the shelter's kitchen table, I got to know a few of the regulars. Dax was a loudmouth line cook with big opinions and bigger stories. Julian was the quiet type, a nursing student who volunteered in the evenings and somehow always ended up sitting across from me, eating slow and listening hard. About 4 days in, my phone lit up with Dad. Then again. Then 3 more times. I let it buzz. On the 5th day, I picked up. "Ronan," he said, voice tight with something that started like panic but shifted fast into control. "There's a place for you here. Your room's untouched. Running away won't fix anything." He paused, then dropped the real message underneath. "Your college, your car, none of that exists without my paycheck." I didn't answer right away. I just looked at the clock on the microwave behind the front desk, counted the seconds between each breath, and hung up without saying a word. After that call, Dad didn't mention the birthday. Not once. Instead, he kept saying we were just a family going through a rough patch, like I'd locked myself out of the house on accident instead of being pushed out. He told me, "You can come home whenever you're ready to be reasonable," which sounded more like a threat than an invitation. I threw myself into the job, learned how to steam milk without sounding like I was murdering the pitcher, got to know the regulars by name and order, started waking up before my alarm, telling myself if I could just hang on until the new term started at the community college, I could fix all of it. My credits, my life, my future. One slow afternoon, I was sitting in the cafe's tiny back room, chewing on a stale muffin that tasted like dust, trying not to nod off on the milk crate we used as a chair. I checked my school email out of habit. One new message blinked in my inbox. From Malcolm Cho, Student Success Advisor. Subject, confirming your withdrawal. I clicked it, closed it, opened it again, like it might read differently the 3rd time around. It didn't. The email thanked me for letting the college know I'd be taking a semester off. It confirmed my withdrawal and noted the cancellation of my enrollment and all dependent-based financial aid. That was the phrase that made my vision blur. Dependent-based. My hands were shaking before I even hit call. "Mr. Hale?" Malcolm sounded caught off guard when he picked up. "Is everything okay?" "I didn't withdraw," I said. There was a pause. "You didn't?" "No, I didn't fill out any forms. I didn't tell anyone anything. I was planning to enroll for the spring." The silence on his end stretched too long. Then his voice dropped an octave. "I don't want to speak out of turn, but your parents contacted the office. They said there had been some behavioral issues and that, as a family, you'd decided it was best for you to take time off." My throat went dry. "And they pulled their financial support?" "They requested we cancel any aid tied to dependent status," he said. "I'm sorry. I assumed the message had been communicated to you." He kept it professional, like he was walking a tightrope between policy and basic decency. "Listen," he added, quieter. "If this isn't what you want, there are ways to reapply as an independent student. It takes time, a lot of paperwork, but it's not impossible." I thanked him and hung up. Outside, the air had warmed up, but I felt cold anyway. I leaned against the brick wall behind the cafe, phone still in my hand, and stared out at the parking lot. This wasn't just worry anymore. This was a tactic. They were making decisions about my future while acting like it was my own choice, smiling while they pulled the rug out from under me. That night, I sat in the common room at Harbor House long after lights out, the TV off, my phone still glowing in my palm. Shelley walked in, took one look at me, and didn't ask for the full story. "They cut off your school money?" she asked. I nodded once, and told the college I agreed. She blew out a breath and sat next to me. "You wouldn't believe how many parents pull tuition, bank accounts, housing, just to teach their kids a lesson. It's not about support, it's about control." She told me about a legal aid clinic Harbor House worked with and asked if I'd be willing to talk to someone. I said yes before I could change my mind. 2 days later, a thick envelope landed in the mail pile with my name on it. My stomach twisted before I even opened it. Inside was a formal letter, printed and stapled neatly, signed by a lawyer I'd never heard of. It stated, in cold legal terms, that my parents would no longer claim me as a dependent, that they were withdrawing all financial support, and that I had 21 days to pick up any remaining belongings from my room before they cleared it out. Folded between the last 2 pages was a note in my mom's careful handwriting. "We warned you. Actions have consequences. This is what happens when you walk away from family." I held it in my hand for a while before folding it back up and sliding it into my backpack, next to the $87 I'd been stretching like a lifeline. After that letter, the car became the one place that still felt like mine. Not legally, maybe, not on paper, but emotionally it was the only space in the world that didn't belong to Harbor House, or my parents, or some system deciding where I fit. I started sitting in it between shifts, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes an hour. I kept a spare hoodie and a couple textbooks in the trunk, along with a bag of loose change from the cafe tip jar Toby let us split. When the shelter got loud or the common room TV wouldn't shut up, I'd walk down the block, slide into the driver's seat, and breathe. The cracked vinyl seat still smelled faintly like motor oil and peppermint gum. It reminded me of Walter's garage. I thought about that day more often now. He had leaned over the open hood, showing me where to check the oil and how to listen to the engine for trouble. Before I left, he tapped the hood twice with the flat of his hand. "Sometimes a man needs a way to leave," he told me, "even if he never uses it." He said it half joking, but his eyes had been serious. One rainy Thursday night, I closed the cafe with Carrie. The mop bucket sloshed while I dragged it across the tile, and my hands smelled like coffee grounds and cleaning soap. "You're getting faster," Carrie said while stacking chairs. "First week you looked like the espresso machine might bite you." "It still might," I said. "I'm just better at dodging." We laughed. I clocked out, grabbed my backpack, and pushed open the back door into the alley. The streetlight flickered like always, but the parking spot underneath it was empty. I stopped walking. For a moment, I just stared at the wet pavement, trying to convince myself I'd parked farther down. I walked the length of the alley once, then again, then around the block. My heart started pounding harder with every step because I knew exactly where I'd left it. When I came back inside, Carrie looked up from wiping the counter. "You okay?" she asked. "My car's gone." Her face tightened. "Oh, shoot. There was a tow truck earlier, maybe like an hour ago?" My stomach dropped. "Who called it?" She shook her head slowly. "I don't know. Some older guy and a girl about our age were standing near the car pointing at it. I figured it was some repo thing." The words hit like a punch. Older guy, girl about our age. My brain jumped straight to a message from Elodie a week after I left. She'd texted late at night asking if I was safe. I'd sent her a picture of the alley behind the cafe and joked that I smelled like espresso all the time now. She wrote back, "I won't tell them, promise," followed by a bunch of nervous emojis. Standing there now, staring through the window at the empty alley, I could picture her sitting at the kitchen table whispering everything anyway. "Do you remember the towing company name?" I asked. Carrie thought for a second. "Something with Midwest in it. Blue truck. Phone number was on the side." I found the number online and called. The guy on the phone sounded bored while he typed. "Yeah, a vehicle with that plate was released earlier tonight," he said. "Released to who?" "Registered owner, Gordon Hale." My throat tightened. "That car was given to me." He didn't react. "If you're not the registered owner, I can't discuss the account," he said calmly. "You'll have to talk to him." The line clicked dead. A few days later, 2 envelopes showed up at Harbor House with my name on them. One from the insurance company canceling coverage. The other from the DMV confirming the vehicle registration under my parents' names and noting some internal record correction. I called Walter that afternoon. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounding tired. "Ronan, everything all right?" "They took the car." There was a long pause. "Your dad told me you abandoned it downtown," he said slowly. "Said they needed to take responsibility before something bad happened." My chest tightened. He brought over a paper for me to sign, said it was just insurance paperwork. Walter exhaled hard. "I should have asked more questions," he said quietly. "If I'd known they were cutting you off like this, I never would have signed anything." I believed him. His voice carried too much regret to be fake. "It's okay," I said, even though it wasn't. That night I sat on the back stairs behind Harbor House with my head in my hands, realizing they hadn't just taken a car. They'd reached out and grabbed the last thing that ever made me feel like someone in that family wanted me to have a way out. The morning after I broke down on the back stairs, I found Shelley in the office and told her I was ready. I didn't want to wait for the next hit to land. I wanted to understand what they could and couldn't take from me. She nodded like she'd been expecting it and made a call to a legal nonprofit downtown. 2 days later, I took the number 9 bus past the courthouse, past the same bank where my dad used to work, and got off in front of a squat concrete building with a peeling sign that said Justice Resource Center. The waiting room smelled like burnt coffee and lemon cleaner. I sat in a cracked vinyl chair, flipping through a Parenting Today magazine from 4 years ago. The lights above me flickered like they were fighting to stay on. After 15 minutes, a woman in a plain navy blazer stepped out, holding a clipboard. "Ronan Hale?" I stood. She gave a tight smile. "I'm Nora Blake. Come on back." Her office was cramped and warm, walls lined with mismatched file boxes and legal books that looked older than me. She pointed to a chair and let me talk. I told her everything. The birthday, the car, the letter, the school email, all of it. I didn't even try to keep my voice steady. I just laid it out. She didn't flinch. Didn't ask why I hadn't gone home to work it out. She just took notes and asked for dates. When I stopped, she clicked her pen closed and leaned back. "You're 20, she said. "So legally your parents can cut off support at any time. It's harsh, but it's allowed." She went on, laying it out piece by piece. The car? It was in their name. The odds of me getting it back without Walter testifying were slim, and even that could blow up his relationship with them. Then she started using phrases like financial control, coercive behavior, punitive withdrawal of support. She said them like textbook terms, but they cracked something open in my chest. I wasn't overreacting. This wasn't just a family fight. It was a pattern. "There's a path forward," she said. "It's not easy, but you're not stuck." She listed off steps: how to file for independent student status after proving estrangement, how to keep them from accessing my school records, how to document everything: letters, texts, voicemails, emails. Before I left, she handed me a printed checklist. "Start with the basics," she said. "Open your own bank account if you haven't already. Forward your mail to the shelter program. Keep a folder of everything you get from them. Everything." I nodded. "Okay." Back at the cafe, I carried that folder like it was a briefcase. Toby raised an eyebrow the first time he saw it. You starting a band or a lawsuit? I just shrugged. He looked at me a second longer, then said, Whatever it is, don't let them scare you back into something that hurts. Over greasy diner fries later that week, Dax told me about the time his last foster dad tried to keep his Social Security card locked in a drawer for safekeeping. Safe for him, maybe, he said, laughing, but the edge in his voice didn't feel like a joke. Julian, the spreadsheet guy, offered to help me build a budget. He said it like it was no big deal, just numbers, but I knew what it meant. For the first time since I'd left home, I wasn't just surviving someone else's damage. I was actually building something. It wasn't perfect. It was bus rides and tired feet and forms I barely understood, but it was mine. A couple months into the routine, work, bus rides, the occasional grocery store dinner, I was wiping down the cafeteria counter after lunch when Shelley called me into the office. She didn't say much, just motioned to the chair and waited until the door was closed. We've got a slot in step-up housing, she said. Shared apartment, 3 bedrooms, over a laundromat on Willow and 5th. You've kept your job, stayed clean, no complaints. I think you should apply. My first instinct was hesitation. Another move, more paperwork. But something in her face said this was the next right thing. So I said yes. I went to see the place that afternoon. It looked exactly how it sounded. Second floor walk-up, cracked railings, and the whole hallway smelled like burnt lint and lavender dryer sheets. The buzzer barely worked, and the building groaned when you stepped too hard. Inside, the apartment was old but clean. Scratched linoleum floors, kitchen tiles from the 90s, and a living room with a busted couch someone had tried to patch with duct tape. Dax answered the door in mismatched socks and grinned when he saw me. Welcome to the mansion, he said, sweeping an arm like he was showing off a palace. Julian appeared behind him, quieter, holding a mug and nodding once like a greeting. They showed me the empty room, small, square, but with a working lock on the door. No one barges in, Dax said, unless you forget to do dishes, then all bets are off. Julian added, pipes bang like crazy at night. But all I saw was that lock, the kind you control from the inside. That alone made it worth it. I scraped together my share of the deposit using tip money, what was left from the $87, and part of the emergency fund Nora helped me set up. Signing the lease felt heavier than leaving home. It meant I couldn't pretend this was temporary anymore. Moving day was fast, 2 duffel bags, a milk crate, and a backpack. That was it. Seeing it all laid out on the floor made me realize how little of what I grew up with was actually mine, once you stripped away the things my parents could threaten to throw out. Life settled into a rhythm. Morning classes at the community college, just 2, paid for by a small grant Nora flagged. Afternoon shifts at Rusk Coffee. Evenings at the apartment, where Dax ranted about his kitchen job and Julian recited anatomy flashcards under his breath. One night, Dax came home ready to quit, ranting about a customer who snapped at him for undercooked eggs. He slammed the fridge, muttering about how nobody respected line cooks. You could quit, I said, or you could cool off and make rent. He blinked, surprised. You sound like a dad. Honestly, I hope not. But the weird part was, I did sound steady, like I had a foothold for once. Another night, Julian sat on the floor, pale and quiet, after his first patient death at the hospital. He didn't say much at first. Then he said, I felt useless, like nothing I did mattered. I nodded. I get it. That's how I felt when they took school and the car. Like everything I planned just vanished. He didn't answer, but he stayed on the floor with me for a while. Toby started trusting me with more. Inventory, training new hires. One night, while counting beans, he said casually, I lived in my van behind a music venue for 2 months after leaving my old man's house. Sometimes you start from the bottom of a mess. Texts from my parents started coming weekly. Photos of Elodie at school dances. Generic updates from church. Little lines like, hope you're staying warm, or we're thinking of you. They never mentioned the car, or tuition, or the lawyer letter. It took me a while, but I stopped hoping for apologies. I saw those messages for what they really were, reminders that their version of me still had a slot open, in case I ever got tired of having my own life. I didn't even remember it was coming until a bank email showed up that morning, congratulating me on my account anniversary and offering 10% off some useless promo. I was sitting at the wobbly kitchen table with Dax and Julian, helping fill out the last of our new rental paperwork, when Dax glanced at my ID. "Wait a second," he said, tapping the card. "This is today. This your birthday?" I froze. "Kind of," I said. "Doesn't really matter." Dax blinked like I'd just told him I hated dogs. "You didn't say a single thing? Julian, did you know this?" Julian looked up from his spreadsheet. "I knew it was sometime in March. I didn't realize it was today." "I swear we're getting pizza," Dax said, standing like it was a crisis. "I have work tonight," I reminded him, "and cheap pizza isn't the celebration." He smirked. "Don't test me. I will find the greasiest, saddest slice in this city and make it your birthday cake." I shrugged him off, played it cool. Birthdays are overrated anyway. But walking to the cafe that afternoon, all I could think about was last year. The ring on Elodie's hand, the cake with my sister's name piped in blue across frosting that looked expensive. The way my parents acted like I was being selfish for noticing, like it was childish to expect your name to matter on the one day it was supposed to. The shift was slow. Rain drizzled against the front windows, and most of the regulars were no-shows. Around 8, I wiped down the pastry case and started reaching for the time clock. Toby stopped me with a wave and slid a small white box across the counter. "Customer left this behind," he said casually. "Shame to waste it." He didn't look at me when he said it, just turned back to inventory like it was nothing. Inside the box was a vanilla cupcake with too much frosting and a single candle stuck in at a crooked angle. No note, just the smell of sugar and butter and that weird feeling when someone notices you on purpose. I didn't say anything, just carried the box with me on the bus home, shielding it from the rain with my hoodie like it was made of glass. Back at the apartment, Dax was digging through the cabinets when I walked in. He held up a crusty tube of decorating icing like he'd just discovered treasure. "This expired a year ago," he said. "We're definitely using it." He cleared a spot at the table, grabbed a plastic knife, and shoved the tube into my hand. "Brand your dessert, man." I laughed. "Seriously?" "As seriously as your dumb birthday deserves." The icing barely squeezed out. My handwriting was trash, but I managed to scrawl Ronin across the top in shaky blue letters. It looked stupid. It looked perfect. Julian lit the candle, and they both started singing in the most off-key voices I'd ever heard. The wax dripped onto the table. The whole thing took maybe 3 minutes, but I hadn't felt that scene in years. Later, in my room, I texted Walter a photo of the cupcake. I typed, "Second birthday since you gave me the car. Kind of." Then I deleted the last part and just sent the picture. He replied the next morning, "Happy birthday, kiddo. Proud of you." Attached was a blurry photo of his empty driveway. It still stung, thinking about that car, but the pride in his message cut through it. It was the first time anyone in my family had said they were proud of me for something that wasn't babysitting Elodie or keeping quiet during dinner. A few days later, I got an email from Nora. She'd pushed me to write a few essays for scholarship boards. One of them hit. It wasn't huge, but it covered one more class than I could have afforded on my own. Around the same time, Elodie texted for the first time in weeks. More than 2 words this time. She wrote, "I didn't know they'd take the car. I was just trying to help them find you. It's been tense here. Weird." I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. "I love you," I typed. "But calling a tow truck on my life isn't helping. If you keep feeding them info about me, we can't keep talking." She sent a crying emoji and a picture of the ring. I wish things could go back. And that was the moment I realized I didn't. By my second year at community college, my schedule was a mess, but made sense. Classes in the morning, cafe shifts in the afternoon, dinner at the apartment if Dax didn't burn whatever he was experimenting with. Some nights, Julian quizzed himself on med terms out loud while pacing the hallway. Other nights, I'd find myself back at Harbor House talking to new arrivals, not because I had everything figured out, but because Shelley said I didn't sugarcoat things. Apparently that helped. One afternoon, I opened my school inbox and saw a message from Student Services. They were hosting a small panel for first-generation and non-traditional support students. They wanted me to speak. Malcolm had apparently dropped my name. Nora backed it up. I stared at the email for a long time. Telling my story in front of strangers felt like betrayal, even now. I could already hear Dad's voice in my head, calling it making us look bad in public, like he had nothing to do with the stains. Dax saw me frozen in front of the screen and leaned over. Dude, free pizza and a microphone? That's your origin story premiere. Julian didn't even look up from his laptop. I think you'd be good at it. That pushed me over the edge. The room they gave us for the event was awful. Plastic chairs that squeaked when people shifted, buzzing overhead lights that made the whiteboard glow like a hospital hallway. There were maybe 30 students, all looking at me like I might say something that would change how they saw themselves. I kept it simple. I talked about being the easy kid, the one who didn't ask for much. How that sounded like a compliment, but really just meant you were easy to overlook. I told them about my birthday, that my sister got a diamond ring and a cake with my date, but her name on it. I told them I left with a backpack and my granddad's car, that I lost my tuition, that a tow truck came and took the one thing that made me feel like someone in my family wanted me to have a way out. I didn't say Gordon or Lydia, didn't name the town. I talked about control dressed up as concern, how the people who helped me, Shelley, Nora, even Toby, didn't need to share DNA to believe I mattered. Halfway through, I spotted a face in the back that made my stomach tighten, Mrs. Klein. Lived 4 houses down from us growing up. Church casserole queen. My mom used to borrow her punch bowl for holiday parties. She watched me like she didn't recognize what I'd become. Afterward, a few students lined up to talk. A quiet kid in a too big hoodie asked how to leave home without feeling like a traitor. I told him the truth. Sometimes you have to betray the story other people wrote for you to stop betraying yourself. Mrs. Klein stepped up last. She said, I had no idea things were like that. Then she added, your parents, they heard some version of this story. Someone who was here told a friend. She looked at me like she was asking permission. Would you be okay if I gave them your email? I shook my head once. They already know how to reach me, and I walked out before she could say anything else. A few days after the campus event, my phone lit up 3 times in a row with Dad across the screen. On the 4th, I answered. I was standing outside the library, backpack digging into one shoulder, thumb sore from scrolling job listings. His voice came through quieter than I remembered. Not weak, just smaller. We heard you've been telling people we kicked you out. He let it hang there, then shifted. We didn't think you'd actually stay gone, Ronan. I didn't say anything. He went on, like the silence gave him permission. We pulled the tuition in the car to get your attention. We thought once you calmed down, you'd come home and we'd figure it out. I leaned against the brick wall, staring at a cracked window. I'm not yelling, I said. I'm not even mad in the way you probably think. But I'm done pretending those things were loving. Leaving was the first time my life felt like it belonged to me. He sighed, long and slow. Then he said, Can we start over? This has been hard on your mom. Elodie, too. People at church have questions after what they've heard. I let him talk until he ran out of excuses to feel like the victim. You and I can have contact, I said, but my boundaries aren't up for debate. When he brought up Elodie and said, she misses her big brother, I didn't soften. I miss the version of her who didn't help you track me down and take what was mine. She still has your house, your money, your praise. I never got those things the same way. We ended the call polite, but cold, and when I hung up, my hands weren't shaking. My chest wasn't tight. Their approval didn't feel like a grade I was waiting on anymore. Over the next few years, I earned my associates, then transferred to a state school's business program. I kept working cafe shifts. With Nora's guidance and Shelley's contacts, I started a peer group for students who'd been the easy ones growing up, kids who never learned how to ask for help without apology. I moved out of the apartment over the laundromat into a slightly better one with thrift store furniture and a real desk. The rent was higher, but the best part stayed the same. I locked the door at night, and no one could come in just to lecture me for existing. Walter took a bus up one weekend. We split a diner pie. He apologized again for the car paperwork, slid a worn envelope across the table with a savings bond he'd been holding on to, just in case. I used part of it to buy an old hatchback in my own name. Signing that title didn't feel like revenge. It felt like finishing something I started the night I backed out of their driveway. Now I mentor students, quiet girls, quiet guys, kids who call themselves No Trouble. I show them FAFSA forms, tell them which shelters don't ask too many questions, and I remind them they're allowed to take up space. My parents and Elodie still post holiday photos and church events, all filtered to look like nothing ever cracked. But I don't need them to confess for my story to be true. These days, when I light a candle on a cheap grocery store cupcake, I don't wish for them to see me. I look at the name I wrote in icing, my name, and I'm just glad I finally see myself. Quick question before you click away. If family used money to control you, would you walk? Hit hype, subscribe, and like, then comment your answer or a quick reaction.